Today I'll be showing you why I've stopped giving a piece of retirement advice that I used to give at the beginning of my career. Over the last decade, I've gained a lot of experience, and so much has changed in the space of retirement planning, and that is exactly why my perspective and approaches have changed as well. Unfortunately, that isn't the case with all advisors or with the information that you find online. That's exactly why I'm making this video today, so let's get right into it. From my introduction, you may have guessed already that we're going to be talking about the 4% rule. Now, at the beginning of my career working with retirees, I found that this was basically the conventional wisdom. It's what you did to ensure that as a good financial advisor, certified financial planner, you were going to make sure your clients didn't run out of money and that they'd have continued financial stability and prosperity for the rest of their life. Well, through my experience working with hundreds of retirees, teaching courses, doing YouTube videos, continuing my education, all of these things, I've gained a lot of wisdom and experience that have really changed the way that I approach this. So those are the lessons, the things that I want to share in this video today. So the first number one issue with the 4% rule is that it almost, not always, but it almost guarantees that you will underspend what you are capable of spending. Now, given some assumptions, right? Diversified portfolio and all sorts of stuff. I'm not going to go into all the details here. So just kind of this is a high level, explanation that if you start out by just taking 4% of your portfolio, and even with adjustments for inflation, you're almost guaranteeing that you're going to underspend what you could have spent in retirement. And maybe this isn't an issue for you. Oh, what's the big deal? Why do I need to spend more? Well, there's a lot of things that I have found in my experience retirees want to do, things that come up in their life with themselves or by themselves or with their family and friends. They'd like to be able to use some of their money to be able to help and do things, but they are frozen with fear and can't move forward on doing anything on other things that they'd like to be able to do. So there was an article, some research done by Michael Kitces back in 2016, and great article talking about why most retirees will probably never spend down their portfolio. And it really kind of lays out the why behind all of this. So what I want to talk about are some of the issues with the 4% rule and the impact it has on people from what I've observed and what the research shows, and then also why it can sometimes even then be very difficult to change the behavior. So number one, the 4% rule is really optimizing your plan for the worst case scenario. With the original research by Bill Bengen, which was very pivotal, what he was really trying to solve for is even kind of the worst scenario. How much could you take out and still have enough money to maintain inflation-adjusted spending for 30 years? And so really with the 4% rule, you have to understand as a baseline, it is not, the 4% rule is not kind of the starting point for a good plan. It is literally an optimized plan for a worst case scenario. Okay, so maybe you think, all right, well, what's wrong with planning for a worst case scenario? We certainly, if the worst case thing happens, we want to be ready. Absolutely, right? However, maybe some analogies or something could maybe highlight why this is, maybe some of the shortcomings of a worst case scenario planning approach. So let's pretend that, you never wanted to get struck by lightning, and you learned that if you went outside, you had a chance of being struck by lightning. So you made the decision you were never going to leave your house. Okay, great. Never struck by lightning. But it's pretty obvious in this silly example that you're going to end up shortchanging yourself and missing out on life, basically, because you're solving for and trying to avoid this one risk. It's like going on a trip and deciding I am never going to drive my car faster than 50 miles an hour for my entire life, because if I do, I might get in an accident. I have a higher likelihood of getting in an accident. If I drive below that amount, I'm almost guaranteed to never get in a car wreck. Okay, great. All right, you're missing out on quite a bit by following that approach. Maybe simply said, planning for the worst case scenario is rarely the best approach. Yes, planning for the worst case scenario. If it happens, I suppose you'll be ready. But most of the time, the worst case scenario doesn't happen. What if things are just pretty good? What if they're really good? What if they're just okay, right? In all of these other scenarios, 99% of the other possible scenarios, you now have lived a plan, a spending plan that basically shortchanged you. So by starting with the 4% rule, you're almost guaranteeing that you're going to spend less than you actually could have, which translates into missed opportunities and things that you could have done that maybe you really would have wanted to do. This leads me to something else that I've observed. So as I've seen this with retirees, in my experience, what I've seen is that generally, even when people are spending money out of their portfolio, with the exception of some years where the market drops significantly, most of the time with conservative spending rates, portfolios continue to kind of grow over time. And especially as folks get later into retirement, call it like those mid-years in their late 70s or so, their spending kind of flatlines and on a real spending basis often goes down. And so even with, their portfolios, so as someone's spending goes down or kind of moderates over time, their portfolios tend to grow and grow and grow. And even with that being the case, they find it hard to spend more. So even when showing them, hey, look, your portfolio, you've been retired for this amount of this many years and you still have all this money. Hey, look, you could go on this big trip with your family. You could help out your grandkids with education or even with explaining that to somebody in that situation, they still find it very difficult to really believe the numbers and go ahead and do those things. Even more so for somebody early in retirement. And showing them this information on the front end and saying, hey, look, you actually probably can spend quite a bit more than what you're thinking. It's very difficult for somebody to say, okay, that sounds great, I'm going to do it. And I think it all comes back to this instinct we have to survive. And we are not going to wreck our retirement, so we're going to plan for the most cautious scenario possible to make sure that we don't have any issues. So what I have found is in order to really change your spending behavior, we need more than just being told that we can spend more or being shown, some projections that, hey, you're going to be okay. Really what we need as retirees or, people in retirement, not me, and what I have found helpful professionally is having an objective rules-based approach to give you guidance in your spending. A flexible spending approach. The approach that I use now with clients that I find to be the best approach that I've seen or that I've been able to use professionally is a guardrail approach. Now, what a guardrail approach dictates is when you are able to increase your spending sustainably if your portfolio rises above a certain level. And on the flip side, it provides that comfort that if your portfolio drops below a certain level, what's the adjustment that you might need to make in order to stay on course? I'm going to show a little graphic here from an article in Morningstar that basically shows what this looks like. So this article here from Morningstar is showing the implementation of a guardrail approach for a hypothetical portfolio going from 2007 just before the great financial crisis up through 2024. And you can see here on this top chart, let me get out my little marker here. On this top chart, you can see that this client, they started out with a spending amount of just over $6,000 a month. Now, as you go along, you can see these different colors. The shaded area in this chart represents their planned spending. And the blue line here, this represents their actual income, so what they're actually taking out. So let's look at this retiree. They retired and they're planning, hey, you know what? We're going to spend just over $6,000 a month. Okay. And this should be sustainable, good to go. However, if the portfolio drops at any point in time below a certain threshold, this bottom guardrail, then we know that we have to make a small adjustment in order to stay on track. So you can see as they go along, here we go, 2007, we get to, I don't know, what is this? 2008, late 2008, as the market's dropping, you can see this red line represents, they made a small adjustment. So in this case, they took about a 10% drop in their income. So, they went from, let's call it $6,500 a month down to, something more like about $6,000 a month. And you can see that with that drop in income, they keep going along. And then as you can see here that we have an increase in income here and here. Well, what's that all about? Well, what that is, you see these green lines, their portfolio has recovered. And so now they're able to have increases in their income back to their planned spending. and even higher than that. And then as they go along, their portfolio recovers and they're asking, oh, can we spend more? I don't know. Well, this gives them guidance to where, yeah, they actually can spend more. So we go along, their portfolio grows, they could even spend more and more. And then here, oh, portfolio drop, let's make a small reduction in our income. See that really demonstrated here. So here you can see the portfolio through time. This is where they make the downward adjustment. They go along and they keep going and they keep going. And you can see these adjustments through time. You can kind of go back and watch this video slowly and look at this chart to kind of understand how their spending changed over time based on this upper and lower guardrail that they're hitting. With a framework for understanding when you can spend and when you need to reduce and when you can confidently increase spending, this framework can give somebody the ability to objectively, to be able to spend, to improve their spending, be able to do more things in retirement, maybe retire earlier than they were expecting to. And I think another thing that holds people back, aside from not having a framework, is there might be just a knowledge gap, some understanding about how their investment works or how Social Security works or how their pension works that they might have or their rental income, understanding how these things coordinate together. So I find that sometimes there might just be a knowledge gap that somebody has before they can feel more confident in proceeding with a more flexible spending approach instead of just using the most conservative method. And the last thing is that as a retiree, this is going to be your first time being retired, okay? Anyone doing something for the first time is not going to do as good of a job compared with after they've done it for years. I'm a better financial planner today than I was at the beginning of my career, and it's because of experience. You see things. And so another thing that people often need is somebody who has seen these types of things unfold in other people's retirements to be able to give guidance and wise counsel to help them retire with confidence and have the type of lifestyle that they really deserve and have earned. Now, before we wrap up, one final thing I've noticed over the past decade is that the most successful retirees I work with aren't overwhelmed by conventional wisdom because they have a clear and holistic view of their retirement. But I appreciate that it can be a little difficult to ensure you're covering all the bases when it comes to income planning, investment planning, taxes, spending, and all the other facets of retirement, which is why I've dropped a link in the description where you can book a complimentary call with me to cover any questions on retirement planning that you have. So to book a call, click the link in the description, and I'll catch you in the next one.